Presenting your 2026 Stanley Cup champion, Carolina Hurricanes. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate. It is Monday, June 15, 2026. The Hurricanes polish off the Golden Knights in 6 games, Neil. And at no point on Sunday evening did I think that Carolina was in any sort of trouble. Like the tank had run out on the Golden Knights, and as soon as Carolina was able to get on the board early, it forced Vegas to chase the game, and that's not a position that they ever wanted to be in.
And Carolina has that ability to come at you really hard and fast and very offensive early, and they did it throughout the series. They did it throughout the playoffs. This time it was Taylor Hall, who had just gotten hurt and was on the bench grimacing, grabs a pass, and right away it's 1-0, and it seemed to take the air out of the Vegas balloon right away.
You know, if it wasn't bad enough that William Karlsson was not able to go, and certainly key forward for the Golden Knights, not only at even strength, but also in terms of special teams, and that goal that you mentioned. Great play by Jacob Slavin to break up a rush by the Golden Knights, and he hits Hall down the left side, and how Noah Hannafin and Rasmus Andersson allow him to get behind is one thing, and then a great shot over the pad and under the glove of Carter Hart to score that goal. But we had talked about this after Game 5, and I don't think a lot of people were faulting Hart for that goal, but that's the save that he's got to make so Vegas can play level for as long as possible in this game and possibly get ahead. And as we just mentioned, they're playing catch-up the entire night from less than 4 minutes into the game. That was probably Hart's best game of the series, but yet that goal to me stands out as one that I think he needs to have.
Well, you definitely need to have it at that point in the game. It's early. You got to make sure that you keep your team in it. As you said, scored just over the pad, just under the catching glove. It was Rasmus Andersson that was on that side of the ice, the bench's side of the ice. Somehow Taylor Hall got behind him and took that long pass. I still don't understand how Andersson allows him to do that. And then he goes in, and we all know that he's got a good shot. But it's 1-0. And as I said, I felt like, and I'm watching it on TV, but I felt like the whole buzz had gone out of the fortress, they call it.
Middle of the first period, and you go to the other end of the ice, and it's Brandon Bussi, who in 3.5 games after replacing Freddie Anderson has written his story in Stanley Cup lore by finishing off the Stanley Cup. He stops Jack Eichel from enclosed and makes a pair of stops on Pavel Dorofeev. And then late in the first period, makes 4 stops on the Golden Knights power play. And if you don't think that he was in their head at that point, then you would have been convinced after that series of stops, because there was just something about his presence there. We thought during the course of the season, this would be the guy that Rod Brind'Amour would go to start the playoffs. And it's just something that after 13 wins, he winds up as the finisher.
I like what Craig Button said about Bussi going in for Carolina. He said that that's one thing that might be able to get into the head of the Vegas Golden Knights, is this goalie who catches with the other hand. If you remember, back when there was a penalty shot for Marner, on the night that he got the 3 goals, could have had 4. He said afterwards, I didn't even know they changed goalies. And of course, Bussi catches with the right hand, Anderson with the left. You had to know, because you've got to shift one way or the other. But goalies can often get into your head, and this was a complete change for them. They'd been studying Freddie Anderson during all the previous series, in case they got to play Carolina. Now all of a sudden they got this kid, Brandon Bussey, in the net who catches with the other hand. They never seem to be able to figure him out. They did win a game with him in the net when it was overtime, that comeback game. It banked in off the bottom of his skate, I believe.
Right.
It was a fluky goal. But since that fluky goal, Carolina really never looked back.
Do you think, in retrospect, that had Carolina stayed with Anderson, there's no injury, and they just pull him for the one game and he's fine? Because there's no doubt he's injured. We'll find something out because he wasn't even the backup for the last 3 games. But do you think, all things equal here, that Carolina wins the Cup with Anderson going the distance?
It's a good question. I would say probably. Depends how the team plays in front of them, because the team seemed to have the utmost confidence in Bussey and played hard and went and could do what they do best, which is go on the offense and go hard and fast at the other team. If Anderson's in net, are they quite that fast? Do they go quite that hard? Are they a little bit more reserved because of their goalie? Now it's conjecture, but I believe they probably would have won.
But I do remember what Craig said also, is that Freddie Anderson is not the goalie that gets into your head. And I think Bussey did in this case.
Well, I think he must have, along with, other things that were fortuitous for Carolina without any doubt. Like Carlson being hurt in Game 5 in Carolina was a big deal to both teams. It was a big blow to John Tortorella and his team, probably a motivating factor for Carolina.
I still think one of the things for Vegas, though, is way too much of a pass-first mentality. I mean, they got their share of looks, but there were a series of plays on the power play, overpassing, trying to, get Dorofeev set up in that circle. Even though we're not at the third period in terms of recapping the game, if you go back and you look right at the start of the third period, and it's 2-0. And Mark Stone has a partial 2-on-1, and he's looking to pass right away. And you got to put that puck in Bussey's skates, hope for a rebound. Maybe your shot goes in. But to me, that told me all I needed to know about where Vegas was mentally in terms of generating quality or addressing their approach. They didn't get traffic in front of Bussey the entire night. It was a lot of one and done.
And there's no doubt that Stone should have shot. And Stone told you as much when the play came quickly to a whistle and he smashed his stick down on the ice. And you could tell he was completely frustrated with himself, because I know I was sitting with a friend watching the game and both of us jumped up and said, why didn't he shoot? So that's how obvious it was. But that's that hesitation that Bussey might have put into the opponent. That might be right there what was going on with the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll never know because we're not mind readers, but whatever it was, we know how it ended.
But the real killer here came with 6:29 left in the second period. A pair of turnovers by Noah Hannafin under pressure, and it was Logan Stankoven picking off the puck both times. And on the second one, gets it to Jackson Blake. His shot goes in off of Mitch Marner to make it 2-0. For Marner, I think the third goal that he scored in game number 3 was really the turning point for him in this series, because in the last 3 games, 1 assist and a -5. And it doesn't take away from what he accomplished in the playoffs leading up to the last 3 games of this series. But certainly his drop-off, a big key to why Vegas could not push this to a Game 7.
But if you remember a few games ago, and it was probably after that hat-trick game, remember I said Carolina has to stop Marner. He looks like Connor McDavid on the ice all of a sudden. And however they did it, they did it. Whether it was partly himself not playing the way he did, not doing something he did, or whether it was the scrutiny of the Hurricanes, they were able to take him out of the equation. And before that, you remember this, I mean, Marner looked unbelievable in the first few games. So they nullified him and nullified Eichel, basically. And then Carlson goes out. And then you can see everybody, including the captain Stone, as we just talked about, they're all squeezing their stick and doing things they shouldn't be doing, like that pass on the 2-on-1, instead of just shooting it at Bussy and allowing Bussy to have to handle it or play it and might be a rebound.
A little bit of bad luck also, because on a power play midway through the third period, Eichel hits a crossbar, and you remember, similar situation, third period of game 4, power play, game tied, hits a crossbar. So there are a lot of things that go into this, and certainly Eichel shooting, still coming up empty, and he had only 2 goals in the playoffs, 20 assists, but only 2 goals and none in the last 8 games.
And, of course, we know that Jack Eichel's a pass-first mentality, and that's what makes him so amazing. He's like an Adam Oates out there. Adam Oates was always pass, and setting up Brett Hull and others. But when Marner's not scoring, and now Eichel's not scoring, getting no goals, getting no attempts even, who's going to do it?
Nikolai Ehlers scored the first goal of the series, and he also scored the last goal of the series, hitting the empty net with 68 seconds left. But overall, the way Carolina defended, and they were going for the most part in the third period with a 1-1-3, and Vegas was simply unable to get pucks in deep and retrieve and get the grimy kind of goal that they needed to get back in the game. And as I watched this, the longer it went on, the more this series started to look like the Canes series against Ottawa, their series against Philly, and their series against Montreal. And it just took a little bit longer to get there in the series against Vegas. But you saw through all 4 series what clearly separated Carolina from the pack, and that was their tenaciousness and their ability to simply smother their opposition.
Yes, and I want to comment on the Ehlers empty net goal. You know who was back in front of the net when Ehlers took the shot through his legs?
I think it was Marner.
It was Marner, and Marner was doing the pink flamingo to get out of the way. I mean, he looked like he didn't want anything to do with stopping that. I'm sure he did want to stop it, but he's sort of like, oh, here it comes, and it went into the net through Marner's legs, and 68 seconds to go. I was like, how must that feel right now, right at this second? If you're a Carolina fan, if you're a Carolina player, if you're a Carolina parent, if you're a Carolina anything, how must it feel that when that puck went in the net, you've just won the Stanley Cup? It was an incredible moment.
To watch it, and whether you root for a team or not, and we have no skin in the game here per se, but you get this appreciation every year of what it takes for that champion to finally emerge. And for Rod Brind'Amour in particular, 8 years at this, in the playoffs every year, and people were doubting, will his system work to this point in the playoffs? It finally gets there. But you look at some of the personnel and some of the things that happened for this team. Nikolai Ehlers decides to sign as a free agent. They make the trade for AndreMiller, who played well enough to win a Stanley Cup. But I think the one thing that they got, or maybe 2 things, that was missing from past playoff years, certainly the goaltending, and we have documented that ad nauseum, but also secondary scoring. We were always concerned about their scoring depth, and even though that top line of Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, and Seth Jarvis didn't produce on the level that we may have expected, that second line of Taylor Hall, Logan Stankoven, and Jackson Blake, and then you toss in what Jordan Staal did by scoring in each of the first 5 games of the series, that's why this team is Stanley Cup champions now.
How can you not be happy for Jordan Staal, 37 years of age, 17 years in between Stanley Cups, 20 years old in Pittsburgh and now 37 in Carolina. Just the whole thing, I thought, you talk about the secondary scoring, you talk about that line, Hall, who everybody thought, well, I shouldn't say everybody, I at least thought he was done when he was in Chicago. He got healthy scratched in a game in Chicago when they were the worst team in the league. He goes and gets brand new life in Carolina. You've got Logan Stankoven, who should be in Dallas. He was a Dallas draft pick. But in that trade for Rantanen, he ends up in Carolina and looks like a building block for something great for the future. And you get Jackson Blake, the son of Jason Blake, the famous Islander player for years and years and years, who looks tremendous as well. And this is young two wingers with the elder statesman center iceman. It was a great line. And then you get Jordan Staal. I mean, when you think about it really, and you put all the components together, when you talk about the star Aho and, you know, a budding star in Shvetnikov, or a star, you could call him, Seth Jarvis, who can contribute any night in all different ways in the game. I mean, you got a lot of talented people there. And even you go down to people that weren't drafted, like Eric Robinson plays on their fourth line. What a great fourth liner he is. So, I mean, it's not hard to see. And then, you know, I haven't even mentioned the defense. You did. AndreMiller came in. You wouldn't even recognize he was the guy that played for the Rangers. Jacob Slavin, who's now talked about by everybody. There was a poke check last night that was incredible where he reached out, stopped Eichel coming over the blue line with a poke check. So many guys playing at a level that you hadn't seen before, and they're all doing it at the same time.
Shane Gostisbehere was terrific. Sean Walker was terrific. Jalen Chatfield. You go up and down the line here, and there was no crack in this team. But let's go back to Staal for a second, because having watched 6 decades, I can't recall ever seeing a player with rather modest stats, to say the least, first 3 rounds of the playoffs. 2 goals, 3 assists for Staal. Have you ever seen a player that has come out of nowhere and win the Conn Smythe by defining himself really purely in the final with his scoring, his faceoffs, and just his overall presence seemed to manifest itself in this nice 6-game package to win that award?
No, I haven't. You could change the Conn Smythe to the MVP of the Stanley Cup final rather than the MVP of the playoffs. But he gets the MVP of the playoffs simply because he was so demonstrative in the final. And it was clear who was going to win it if Carolina won the cup. It was clear. I think the other thing is that Carolina scores by committee, right? Yeah. You know, it's just not one superstar out there putting pucks in the net every game. And so while there was a lot of different great performances by Hurricane players, the one you couldn't miss was the captain at 6'4", winning all his faceoffs, scoring 5 goals in 5 games, and playing physical and all the rest of it. So, I mean, it's odd, Vic, because we don't usually get a non-star winning these awards. 2 years ago, you have Connor McDavid, who wins the Conn Smythe Trophy because he is such a superstar, an unbelievable player, dominates the playoffs, but his team doesn't win, and he doesn't come out to get the award, which I don't blame him when you're in that kind of an atmosphere of the way the NHL does it now with fireworks and all the rest of it. Last year, Sam Bennett, who during the entire playoffs was scoring goals, important goals all the time, not just in the final. And we can go back on and remember all the people that have won the Conn Smythe Trophy. And most of them have done great things from the first round, the second round, the third round, and then, of course, in the fourth round, which is the Stanley Cup final. But Captain Jordan Staal, while he was there and contributing in the first 3 rounds, he was absolutely demonstrative in the final round.
So after 3 games, this final was already being anointed, perhaps on the path to being the greatest in Stanley Cup history. And I think we kind of fizzled at the end, because if games 1 through 3 were outstanding, I think we could say Game 4 was good. Game 5 was okay. Game 6 was a slog.
Game 6 was a one-sided game. Carolina got the lead and protected the lead. We hadn't seen that. Now, we loved games 1 to 3 because we didn't know what the heck's going to happen in the game. You know, it would go one way, the other way, the other way, the other way. And it became less and less like that as the series went on. They tightened up as the series went on. And when you tighten it up, it's not as exciting, let's face it. So it's not the greatest Stanley Cup final ever. And for one simple reason, it only went 6 games. You have to go 7 games to have the greatest Stanley Cup final because it's a 7-game series. And if you want something to be great, it's got to go right down to the wire where whoever wins this game wins the cup. And we didn't get that with this one, but it was still a great series and a really deserving champion in the Carolina Hurricanes.
And the way they closed it out was special. They did it their way. They stuck to what worked for them the entire playoffs. And anybody with an appreciation of the sport could clearly appreciate how the Hurricanes locked this thing down at the end. It was outstanding.
It really was. Really terrific.
And one final kind of fun note here as we wrap up the 2026 Stanley Cup final. We saw Brandon Bussi, of course, come in heroically, taking over for Freddie Anderson and delivering the Stanley Cup, and he will be getting married next month. And if you go back 20 years, we saw a pretty similar situation because Cam Ward wound up taking home the Conn Smythe Trophy, and he didn't start the playoffs either. He took over for Martin Gerber, who started the postseason for Carolina before yielding the net to Ward. And after winning the Stanley Cup, Ward got married as well. So 20 years apart, kind of a fun little tidbit there, a little bit of comparison.
And I guess all you could say to that is, well, all good things must come to an end.
What does that mean?
Well, he won the Stanley Cup. He had all those parties, but then he had to get married. So before we go, I got one more for you to talk about. You usually get me to talk about all the hockey nuances. ABC and ESPN, of course, being owned by ABC, as you would know.
Well, Disney.
What's the assessment you've made of, you know, Steve Levy, Mark Messier, PK Subban, Ray Ferraro?
Well, first of all, the open for last night I thought was outstanding, with Mess hosting the Inner Circle, and the Inner Circle, of course, suggesting that small group that is able to go on and win the Stanley Cup, and players and coaches and teams that have defined themselves. And also a great little cameo by Gary Bettman standing behind the bar to greet Mess there. I thought from a production standpoint was very good. Top to bottom, I thought Sean McDonough was very good. I thought Ray was terrific as usual. I thought we did have a little bit of an overabundance of information in terms of what was being spoken by Sean. And also, I felt I was getting ambushed by graphics for the entire playoff. But it's what they do. It's how they prefer to present themselves. And, you know, some people love it. Some people don't like it. I like it in moderation. I got too much of that. I thought the full screen graphic look with flying pucks and animation was terrible. But overall, I thought the presentation itself was good. A couple of things that I didn't need to see was Steve and Mark and PK. PK's cape and glasses going to Steve. Second intermission of Game 6, I didn't think was necessary. I think this is serious stuff and really not the time for levity. So I thought, again, you know, overall, it was a good job, but certain things that I would have liked to have seen less of, let's say.
I know what I would have liked to have seen less of, but we won't get into that. Celebrations for Carolina. When is the parade and what's going to happen?
Parade through Raleigh, and that will take place at 11 o'clock on Saturday. And, of course, no parade could be as grand as the one that you had back in 1994 with ticker tape coming down from skyscrapers. And I think the most important thing for Hurricane fans, take after what your group did in 1994, or the fans. No arrests after the Stanley Cup win, no arrests at the parade. And, of course, a couple of nights ago, even though the Knicks had a great championship, got marred by some violence. So hopefully the Hurricanes take the model of the 1994 Rangers and have a safe parade and celebration.
And I'm sure they will. Having gone to a few games in Raleigh and living in the Carolinas, this is a different group of fans. This is not a group that screams out, me, 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 me. It's all about me, which the East Coast seems to want to do in all the different cities. So I just think it'll be a happy event. I'm sure that it'll be really well attended. I think the people in North Carolina are thrilled that they've got a champion again in that state, and they deserve it.
Why don't you recap the first and second team All-Stars this year before we sign off?
Sure. I've always thought that growing up as a kid, of course, in the original six, the All-Star team was a big, big deal. It's not as big a deal today with 32 teams, I guess, because you can't fit enough guys onto two teams. And the two teams, of course, are composed of just the starting lineup. They're not composed of a whole team. So let's look at the first All-Star team, which is what you would think, the centerman being Connor McDavid, right wing being Nikita Kucherov, who won MVP of the league, left wing being Jason Robertson. Pretty good for Jason Robertson to be on the first team All-Stars. And then not surprisingly, Cale Makar and Zach Werenski are the defense pair on the first team, with the Vezina Trophy winning Vasilevsky in net from the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's the first team. The second team, and it's hard to believe I'm going to say this, second team All-Star Nathan McKinnon at center. That's because you can't put two centers on the first team. The right winger David Pasternak from the Bruins, left winger Cole Caulfield from the Montreal Canadiens, defenseman Rasmus Dahlin, along with Evan Bouchard, the league-leading scoring defenseman this season. And, of course, in net, I shouldn't say of course, but we have in net Logan Thompson of the Washington Capitals. So that's your first and second All-Star teams.
Our website is NHLWraparound.com. And remember, we are on all podcast platforms, including our new partner, Buzzer. So please visit them at bzzr.com. You will find an enormous amount of great content there. Our upcoming traffic for the rest of this week, we will have the spring cleanings, the Vegas Golden Knights and Carolina Hurricanes. Yes, Stanley Cup champions do have work ahead, so we'll be doing those. And then coming up next week, our draft and free agency preview. And then on Wednesday, July 1st, Neil and I will recap the first day of free agency. And then on the week of July 7th, we'll have our full free agency recap once the dust really settles. So on behalf of Neil, I am Vic. And congratulations to the 2026 Stanley Cup champion, Carolina Hurricanes.